This month's topic is all about the trends and opportunities in digital accessibility in 2021. Obviously, last year was a year unlike any other because of the pandemic. There were lots of challenges. There were also lots of business opportunities that came out of 2020 in the digital space. So we're going to be looking at the big accessibility solutions that were coming out of it, and also what the top accessibility trends we think are going to be for 2021 and beyond. And the key thing here is to look at how your organization can use this information to handle those challenges that are coming through to accessibility, but also to take advantage of those opportunities. So my name is Jonathan Hassell. I'm the CEO of Hassell Inclusion, and I'm going to be trying to take you through this whole journey on what this year is going to look like. And we're going to be covering quite a number of things today. It's going to be quite fast paced because there are lots of aspects of accessibility that have actually been impacted every year by updates in technology, by updates in the way people want to use technology. So we're going to be looking at all of these elements one by one quite quickly to see how changes in all of these different elements of what we term the accessibility ecosystem will provide those challenges or opportunities to you. But I wanted to start out by asking, why is this so important? Why is accessibility so important at a time when some businesses are struggling to survive? Why would accessibility be something that could be an opportunity for them to actually get past those difficulties that the pandemic has brought to us? How is accessibility important in 2021? And the key thing here is that we at Hassell Inclusion have been trying to answer that question for organizations for a long time now. We've been trying to define what, if you like, excellence in accessibility looks like and how organizations can get there. And it's all about how to get accessibility done well in your organization, so you're able to handle the challenges well and you're able to take advantage of the opportunities that come your way. And it's very much about getting good and keeping good. This ecosystem that I'm going to be talking about is a key part of the fifth element of ISO 30071 Part 1, the standard that we helped author that enables organizations to get mature in accessibility. And the key part of that final aspect of it is how to keep up with changes in technology, changes in the way people wish to use technology. So what we're going to be talking about today is a fundamental part of that international standard. So we're going to be looking at things like, how do you handle in your organization changes in the accessibility guidelines that you might be wanting to use? WCAG is going from 2.1 to 2.2 and 3. What does that mean for you, for your organization? And then new technology advances, so new JavaScript libraries or content management systems, all of these sorts of things are delivering more and more progress in technology year on year. And so how do you handle that? That is the key thing about understanding this ecosystem. It's about saying, these are all the different places that things can change. What do we do about it? The other thing to say is that if the things that I'm talking about today are interesting to you, but you're not sure if our predictions for 2021 and the future are to be believed or relied upon, then you can actually look at some of the predictions that we've done in the past. We've been leading and tracking this for our clients for years and years and years now. Actually, in 2019, for the first time, we opened up and shared some of that publicly via our website, via 3 blogs we did at the time. So go back and have a read of those blogs in 2019 and see if we were on the money then. If we were on the money then, chances are we probably should be listened to now on these sorts of things. As I say, predicting the future is always difficult, but having a track record of having done this for clients over the years really helps. So changes in the needs of people with access needs is the first aspect of this. It's what has massively changed because of the pandemic, that stay at home, work from home, shop from home, do everything from home, this has changed the way people relate to digital technology. So how does that impact the way you do accessibility? From our perspective, digital is now obviously the essential connector for all people. In 2016, the UN declared the internet to be a human right. They were ahead of the game, if you like. Not everybody necessarily agreed with them at that point, especially older people who might have considered the internet to be something for younger people. But in 2020, the pandemic proved them absolutely right. This was the digital accelerant of the decade, according to a number of companies out there. COVID-19 accelerated companies' digital comms strategies by an average of 6 years. That's quite something. And so companies have really bought into using digital as their means of connecting with their customers, their users, their public. So if you like accessibility, if it isn't in there, it deprives you of your rights. If digital is essential, as this rather funny chart shows from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, then having this great information available online, but people not being able to access it because it's not been made in an accessible format, actually deprives people of something which is now utterly essential for their life. The Maslow pyramid you can see there is the needs that people have from their life. I posted this a few years ago. Somebody quite cleverly, I think insightfully and rather funnily, put Wi-Fi at the bottom there. You know, once you've got your safety and your survival, actually Wi-Fi is now so important for life. The internet is so important for people to go about their daily business, whether it's their work, their leisure, their shopping, their transport, their planning, whatever it is, it's all done online. And without online, you don't feel like you are able to do all of the things you want. That's why accessibility is so important. And that's from one side. From the other side, people need Wi-Fi to be able to connect with organizations. But the other thing applies as well. Organizations need the internet to be able to get their business. You know, the high street footfall in the last year has dropped by 65%. What that means is that organizations need to be able to find their customers online. And that's why so many organizations have, if you like, pivoted from making the high street their focus, with all of those jobs, with all of those people serving in all of that property, in all of those shops. Now, a lot of that has been shifted onto the online presence, distribution centers, making sure that customer service is able to happen all via online, and those parcel force and Amazon people who are forever knocking at people's doors, delivering products directly to them. This is massively important. The other thing to say is that people with disabilities have really benefited from this in a lot of ways. People with disabilities have been asking to work from home for years and years. On the left of this picture here, we have Toby from my team. If you've been in these webinars before now, you'll know that Toby has a great story about how he tried to get into one of his clients in Canary Wharf, and he wasn't able to get into the inside of the boat that he took down the Thames to get there. It was winter. I was able to get onto the boat, but not into the boat. So he had to spend the whole of the time on deck, freezing. And by the time he got to his client, he really wasn't in his best state to be able to deliver a great presentation. Working from home has none of those problems at all. And these are some of the reasons why people with a disability may have been wanting to do this for years. Now we're all doing it. And so it's really important to see the opportunities in that, and to make sure that those opportunities actually, when we come out of lockdown, are not lost. If you like, we don't need to go back to the old normal. We can actually take some of the opportunities that come out of the situation. I think most people, though, really are looking forward to their children going back to school. I know we are. It's really, really important for the children to have that social contact, not just with their teachers, but with the rest of the pupils in the class. And so how do you do learning at home? That's been a real challenge for all the schools. It's been an even more of a challenge when it comes to children who have a disability. They may have a teaching assistant in the classroom who is there to make sure that they are able to learn with the rest of the children in the class. How does that transition through to the home? That's been a key challenge for schools and special educational needs over this year. And then we also have the group of people who are your new customers, potentially. Older people who may have been using technology sporadically, but not really wanting to use it in a habitual way to buy things, for example, shopping every week, the sort of way I do. This is my mum, and she's been using an iPad for years because she can't read books anymore because her eyesight is degrading. An iPad allows her to change the size of text, so it's easier for her to read. It has a backlight that makes it easy for her to read as well. She never really wanted to shop online, but the pandemic has encouraged her to do that. It's the safest way of shopping at the moment, and that really is working for her. So it's just another example of how this can really play out in the opportunities, because a huge number of people, almost 20% of the population who may have been deciding, no, I'm not going to use digital. I'm going to do things, if you like, in a non-digital way. I'm going to go do my shopping in a shop. This year, they are now saying, we are open to use your internet shopping. And so how are we all handling their needs? Accessibility plays a fundamental part there. And finally, even when we're back in the shops, digital may be the entry barrier. Customers won't immediately feel comfortable going back into shops all of the time, standing in lines, especially waiting for tables in restaurants. If you recall what was happening last summer and in the Eat Out to Help Out, there was a lot of queuing apps. When you got into the restaurant, you didn't necessarily have a waiter or waitress who came over to take your order. You ordered from your table via an app. There's even things happening in China at the moment where people are saying, okay, actually, if there are some people who have had an all clear pass, that they've had a COVID test and they're fine, that COVID test could be, if you like, the requirement for you to get into certain types of events and things like that. So a QR code to prove that you've been tested and that you're negative today could be your way in. Again, this is why digital is so important, because digital, even when we get back into the real world, if you like, may be an entry barrier for a while as we make that transition through until the pandemic is just a memory. The next section. So what about accessibility legislation, regulation? How's this changed internationally? And well, this is the thing that at the start of the year, people were really, really optimistic about. So the European Accessibility Act, which came into being a few years ago, effectively said everybody needed to get up to WCAG 2.1 AA standard of accessibility for their websites and mobile apps. And this EN 301549, which is a requirements standard for procurement of websites, apps, but also beyond that, this was required as well. So everybody all over Europe, even UK with Brexit, would do the same thing. So is it the same everywhere? Well, no, not really. Actually, we've been doing a lot of stuff with some of our clients who are in France and Italy. And actually, this is something from France's RGAA4 Act. And that doesn't just require you to do WCAG 2.1 AA and to put out there your scores. This actually requires organizations to publish their plan to get better in accessibility. And that's the sort of thing that a lot of companies are kind of going, oh, no one's asked us that before. How do we do that? Well, we have some answers as we go through this session. But the key first answer is the good thing is that there are effectively 3 standards at play wherever you are in the world at the moment. The third one is this one that that helps you with that planning, which is ISO 30071 Part 1. It's not quite so well known in the UK and other countries, but actually the number of countries that I'm now talking to actually get this into their country's legislation is going up and up. So this is a key thing for the future. If you like, from the perspective of legislation, the good thing is there are a few new laws to talk about here today, but the key thing is it's not really laws, it's whether they are followed that's important. And what I've got is a quote here from somebody who sent us we were doing a survey about what people might want us to present on in webinars like this year, and there was a free text box, and this was the answer: any tangible evidence that progress is being made. Now, I think I pretty much know where that person is coming from. I'm not going to say who that person was or what industry they worked in, but it's a general thing, which is you can have great standards, you can have great laws, but actually if people don't do anything about it, then there's a real problem. So that is our next part of our ecosystem, which is, are there any changes in the attitudes and commitment to actually delivering accessibility from organizations? So this, I believe, was the sector that particular person came from. This is the public sector. And the actual results of that European Accessibility Act in the UK, what they call PS-BAR, it required people, all of these government websites to get to 2.1 AA. September was the deadline, and a few weeks after the deadline, Scope put a bit of research out there that said that 9 out of 10 websites that they tested had a multitude of accessibility errors. So did it work? Was the legislation enough? Not really. Now, the UK government response, or at least the one that everybody can see online, is this: more testing. So they're going to test even more sites next year to find out all of those people who haven't got things right. It's almost like a kind of name and shaming way of trying to motivate people's commitment to accessibility. Our viewpoint is a little different, because that's measuring results. And actually, whilst we really, really care about results, at Hassell Inclusion, we're all about why and how behind those results. This is what 2020 looked like: a car crash when it came to PS-BAR. But you could pick your way through the car crash, but to really understand it, you would need to understand 80s movies and these guys. These were the Blues Brothers, beloved of every student of my generation. And these were the guys who caused the car crash. It's about why things happen. It's not about what happens. And actually not asking why, just asking what, gives you the wrong answers. And I believe that this is what has happened, really. You see, I think people mistook what the goal was in some ways, or they just got bogged down in this bit, which is the testing. So loads of websites were tested, and the government is going to test loads more this year. It's kind of like the speed cameras on a motorway. Are things safe? But that's not the goal. A much better goal from that is actually fixing the problems that the tests found. Oodles of tests were done last year. Ask any accessibility company in the UK if they had loads of audits to do. They'll all say, yeah, loads. Ask them how many of the people who had an audit actually came back and asked for help in fixing things. You will find a lot less people saying that, and that is the problem. That 9 out of 10, chances are those 9 out of 10 websites knew all of the accessibility problems they had. They just hadn't got over the hurdle of fixing stuff. Now, so that was the problem of last year, as it were. But the good thing that's kind of come through, which is a really good thing, is that preventing is the thing that some of those same people are asking us for now. They are really wanting to make sure that they learn from the experiences in 2020 and actually get good at accessibility in 2021. So if that's there, that's the public sector. What about the private sector? Well, the private sector, works in a slightly different way, slightly different benefits to get from it. This is how they do it in the USA. Just for those of you who love kind of like legal numbers, there were 2,774 legal filings in the USA last year for people taking companies who own websites or mobile apps to court. That is up 23% on the previous year. And that is one motivation. It's the type of motivation that the Americans use a lot, which is hit each other over the head with legal baseball bats. If you can't get what you need and a lawyer is to hand, that's a good way of doing things. But actually, a lot of that stuff isn't particularly what we really want. What we want is organizations that want to do this rather than are forced into it. And that was the good thing that was happening in 2021. So effectively, what was happening was, and if you read anything over sort of like, what brands need to do in 2021, the first thing they will talk about is brand ethics. There's a couple of reasons for that. The first reason is when people's jobs and lives are kind of threatened, the psychologists say that we get more concerned about our purpose. So therefore, any good technical people who work in digital want to work for companies where the thing they are doing, the thing that the company is doing some good for the world. And organizations like ourselves have been signing up to the UN Sustainable Development Goals for years. That's a lot of other companies are doing it as well. Put simply, if you want to attract the best talent to work for you, be a good citizen. But the other big thing that happened last year was obviously Black Lives Matter and the kind of focus on diversity and inclusion that came out of that. So to be clear, it's not just Black Lives Matter, it's LGBTQ, I can never say that so well, LGBTQ+, gender issues, aging, all of the broader diversity and inclusion thing is a key thing for all organizations. And the great thing is that after years and years and years, disability is starting to play at the party. The Valuable 500 haven't quite signed up 500 companies yet, but they are pretty close, and those companies are absolutely huge. And all of those companies have said disability is part of D&I, and we are making a commitment to it. But here's the thing. The figures may vary a little bit from this, but we reckon at most 30% of organizations have accessible websites, but most of them have inclusion as in one of their values. So effectively, a lot of these websites are not actually doing what they say. And this, again, not me, this is actually from that 5 customer experience trends thing. This is prediction 5. Customers will seek brands that deliver on their D&I promises. And what they're effectively saying here is it's not enough to say it, you need to do it. And just to give you one example, this morning, we found out that Apple are actually changing their execs bonuses depending on how accessible the products that they ship are. That's one sort of way of getting the people at the top of the company really involved in this, because customers require it, and customers are going to be saying, what are you doing for accessibility? So that will motivate people a lot more. If you want more than that, actually, we have a workshop coming up on, I think it's next Wednesday, our benefits workshop. There are oodles of things to win from accessibility, but loads of organizations are really spending more and more time on it. Yep, on to number 4. After number 5, we're going to have just like a quick quiz, but hopefully you're keeping up with us so far. Number 4 is all about changes in the underlying technologies and devices. So this is where we get sort of like geeky for a while. If you missed the CES show, virtual this year rather than in Las Vegas, this is the point where you can see some of the cool new technologies that are coming through. Are these opportunities or challenges for people with disabilities or who are older? And how would you make them accessible? That's the thing I want you to have in your heads. So first thing, telemedicine and health, absolutely massive. Remote health monitoring platforms, especially those with AI, so that people at home can have their routines, if you like, learned by the AI. And if they differ from those routines, an alarm raised. That was something I really want for my parents. I think that would be great. Things like health data on your wrist. So yeah, I bought an Apple Watch 6 for Christmas. Everybody is trying to get into into health, because obviously health is what we're all thinking about. This thing has got stuff on there that enables me to know if there are any difficulties with my oxygen level in my blood, that sort of thing. It's no surprise that Google have bought Fitbit and Apple are going health mad. Intelligence and robots for the home. So smart thermometers are a trend, and so really interesting because we're spending all of our time at home, I guess. So we want to make sure it's nice and toasty. But the interesting thing is you can crowdsource these, and actually they're starting to do this to actually help with COVID data, etc. Whether or not you like that from a privacy perspective, I don't know, but there are some interesting things there. And certainly devices like this are the sort of things that help a lot of people who have difficulty with fiddly controls. Talking about fiddly controls, you want a robot? Lots of domestic robots on their way. Whether or not they'll quite look like this when they actually go out into the shops, we don't know. But you know, if you like, how would you do accessibility for a robot? We'll come back to that one. There's lots of artificial sort of augmented reality, virtual reality, sort of XR technologies that are happening out there. We've got things like new generation smart glasses. We've got haptic vests. This is really cool. So vests that actually allow you to feel things. And some of these are now becoming, if you like, buyable. They were available in the past for, and you're going to love this, deaf people who wanted to participate in concerts so they could feel the music rather than hearing it. Again, some really interesting things coming through and becoming a lot cheaper. So some interesting stuff there. We've got augmented reality already here. A lot of us probably are buying all of our clothes, maybe our furniture, doing makeup. All of this sort of stuff is happening at home at the moment. And so augmented reality on devices is a great way. If I wanted to buy some new glasses and I can't get to the store to be able to check what suits me, that's all possible online now. How would we make that accessible? Because conversion rates from people who are using these things are up 90%. So you will see a lot more of them. We've got cars. So when we're allowed back out again, we've got lots of self-driving cars without steering wheels. That's quite interesting. That might be sort of like really scary for most people, but it might be just a car for most people who are blind. Actually, some really interesting things happening there. And also, the car industry has actually taken one of our terms. They've got a heads-up display in Panasonic's new cars that adds information designed to make the driver's job easier. And they call that assistive technology, which is kind of cool. I think it would help a lot of people, and it shows that assistive technology isn't just, if you like, for people with disabilities, but it can be for everybody. That's all going to be connected by 5G, whether or not you can get it in your area or not yet, or whether or not you've got a phone who can attach to it yet. That's pretty much coming along for everybody. And the thing that I want to, if you like, sort of encourage you to start thinking about is you may be doing, if you like, websites and mobile apps at the moment, but people's real life user journeys, what we would term hybrid. They go from, awareness of things. This is, if I wanted to go to an accessible theatre performance with captions, I would need to know that something was available. I could purchase it on a website. I would then need to travel there to get there. How many technologies would be there for somebody who is hard of hearing to be able to get to the theatre? They then need to be able to access the theatre, and say, for example, they were using a wheelchair as well, that may be difficult, especially if they're older. And then they get the access experience. These, if you like, real life user journeys, I hope is something that people are going to start looking at a lot more, to say it's, the stuff that we do is not just digital. It's actually digital in the real world, and how these user journeys fit together. And just one final thing, remote education, yeah, as I say, Zoom for Teachers is on its way, which will help teachers keep groups of fidgeting children engaged with their lessons. Hopefully I'm engaging you at the moment with with how I'm doing this. But the other thing is that most people in the higher education IT industry We're expecting people to come back from the new year with loads of new devices in their pockets. And what they've done is they've basically said, it used to be that you could only see our stuff on a computer. Now we want your e-learning on all the sorts of devices that you've got, whether it's a video games console, a smart TV or whatever. So again, accessibility may not necessarily be computers. It may be all of the rest of the other things that connect to the internet in your house. Although I've got a feeling it's probably not going to be the Echo Dot. So some interesting things that are happening kind of coming from the world of devices. What about operating systems? Those devices will all have operating systems in them. What's happened in the operating system world? Is there anything you need to know about from an accessibility viewpoint? Well, very little has changed, thankfully. This is going to be a very short session because Apple were concentrating on Apple Silicon really when it came to Mac OS. And Microsoft were really concentrating on their apps. They were concentrating on making sure that Teams was accessible. They were making sure that actually here in Office 365 PowerPoint, I can turn on captions because our Otter feed broke immediately. We started up the call earlier. So you're still getting captions courtesy of Microsoft. So they spent most of their time doing that stuff rather than adding new accessibility features to the operating system. The one thing they did do though was to move from the Edge browser that's been on Windows for a while to a new version, a Chromium version. Unfortunately, it's a little bit of a step backwards when it comes to accessibility. There are some things about it that don't quite work so well if you're doing websites that you want people on Windows to look at, which we all do. So IE 11 is still necessary. And as I say, we have a blog on that on our site at the moment. So good stuff there. And more of the same on mobile. It's all iterative stuff, really. You know, the biggest of the 19 new accessibility features in iOS 14, the one that everybody really spoke about, was the fact that you can tap on the back of your phone now, do a double tap, and you know it will do whatever you like. If that was the most important thing from iOS 14's accessibility features, not much happened. On Android, it was kind of the same. We were actually doing pretty well on mobile phones with accessibility, but there's some good stuff. So action blocks is pretty much like Siri shortcuts a couple of years ago from Apple. So they're kind of catching up there, and they're ahead in some other areas as well. And beyond mobile, some other things that you probably wouldn't pick up on quite so much. The new Apple Watch has a 2.5 times brighter display. There, you know, the guy who actually created the Apple Watch said, you know, that's not an incremental detail if you're visually impaired. So Apple are really thinking about this sort of stuff. Similarly, the Solo Loop that I've got on, it's just much easier to get on than everything else. So if you've got difficulties with fine motor skills, then this is an advance as well. So that's the end of that section. I don't know if you've used Slido before, but it's kind of fun just for a couple of minutes. I'm just interested in which of those that I've presented to you so far do you think will have the most impact on you? I'm thinking really of kind of where you work. But so if you go to slido.com and you put in #67899, then you will see these questions, and all you really need to do is to click 2 of them. Which of the things that I've been talking about so far do you think is going to be the thing that impacts you most? And as you start doing that, what you'll see on the screen here is the results of that from everyone. So thank you. The first person's come in. So changes in legislation, commitment and attitudes. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important. I'll just give you a little while for everybody to find their way into that. There'll be another Slido at the end with all of the 11 ones that I'm presenting on today, but I just thought it would give you something to do and give my voice a bit of a break for a second. So yeah, the attitudes, that seems to be coming out, the legislation, the regulation. Yeah, that all makes good sense to me. So what I'm hoping is that you're finding what we're finding when it comes to attitudes. We are busier than ever, and that's because loads of organizations that didn't used to care are caring now. So yeah, hopefully you're finding the attitudes are improving rather than getting worse. If they're getting worse, please put a note in the chat window in your organization, because our benefits workshop could be a really great way of helping you combat that. That's cool. Thank you very much. I'm gonna move on. The rest of the things that we have, changes in assistive technologies. So obviously, a lot of assistive technologies are actually there in the operating system these days, especially on mobile. And the thing is, when it comes to sort of like laptop or kind of computer-based assistive technologies, they are doing exactly what everything else is doing. They're incrementing in small ways that help users. It don't really affect people creating websites very much. Just to give you an example, these are the standout features in JAWS 2021. Picture Smart, which is AI image description. So if you forget your alt text on your image, then the same sort of technologies that would try and suggest what an image is on Facebook or on any of the Microsoft Office suite is now there in JAWS as well. I think they're a bit late to the party, but it's still a useful thing, even though it gets it wrong more often than not. Voice assistants. So anybody who's used JAWS will know it's a pretty horrible experience involving lots of sort of keyboard combinations with your fingers that you've got to remember. You can now control it with your voice. Yeah, that would be, good in some ways. But then it's all about sort of apps, really. You can get optical character recognition text directly into Word, and there's improved support for MS Teams, because obviously the most important thing for everybody at the moment is, whether it's Zoom, Teams, whether it's Google Meet, whatever your favorite, communication is. And it's pretty much similar for most of the other assistive technologies out there. It's all sort of incremental stuff. There's nothing really big happening. If you want sort of really big-ish, I was on a call with a Sign Time. They're an organization in Austria enabling people to put sign language in a semi-automatic way on their website. So I love the avatars. Again, this isn't new. The one on the right is one that I created for the BBC in 2005. So, but the quality's improved a lot since then, which is nice. But here's the big thing, really. You see, I think the important thing when it comes to assistive technology is none of the above. I think if we're talking about those robots and glasses and all the rest of it, will WCAG be the answer? In WCAG 3, they're going to try and get some new technologies in, but, are you going to be able to control your robot by programming in HTML in a better way with alt text? Chances are not. But there is a good answer, and I think it's this. It's in your pocket or on your desk. At the moment, we already have, in the home, the smartphone being the control device for setting up your Echo Dot, for controlling your robot vacuum cleaner. Put simply, if you take the user interface on the device and put it on a phone app, it's a much cheaper thing to do. And it also means it's a much more accessible thing to do, because we can all make accessible phone apps, or at least if we know how to do that. We can help if you don't. And then when you're outside the home, as I say, we've already been using these for kind of tickets, but last year we started using them for menus, making ordering from the table in the restaurant, all of that sort of stuff, massively important going forwards. So this one, I'm not going to spend very long on, but I just wanted to just pop it into your minds. So all of this technology is absolutely brilliant if people know it's there, and a lot of people don't. For example, will your mum know the controls for changing the size of text and things on her phone? If she doesn't know that, and mine didn't until I told her about 5 times and she wrote it down, then they won't be getting the great stuff that comes from assistive technologies. So it's not enough to make sure the technologies are there. You need to make sure that people know. Then a brief section on accessibility standards. There's a lot of technology standards out there for accessibility. What's changing? Well, the big change actually is WCAG. So at the moment, as we start 2021, WCAG 2.1 AA is pretty much used everywhere. It's actually the best thing that came out of that European Accessibility Act, is that so many people are actually using 2.1 in the public sector. The private sector have come along as well, which is great because it's been out there for a long time now. 2.2 will be coming by mid-2021, a few months' time. It's got 9 new checkpoints. At the moment, they are a mess. We reviewed them all last year. We're going to write to WCAG and do articles about it. And then we found a good friend of ours, Jared Smith, had already done it. This is WebAIM, so you'll know them. They were the people who made Wave. Of the 9, they think 1 is ready to go and 8 aren't. There's still a lot of work to do. I don't think it's going to be mid-2021. It's going to be later. And I also think that a lot of people are just going to ignore them completely because this thing is coming along. And I think this is why 2.2 isn't so good. I think most of the brains of the operation, if you like, have gone to WCAG version 3. This is the new version that is being readied for the end of next year. It's a big bang. They completely redo everything. There's going to be a new structure. It's going to be very extensible, more new guidelines all of the time. It's going to be new scoring mechanisms, all sorts of things that are really going to take things a long way forward. So I think it's going to be a very, very kind of interesting time with WCAG 3. There are other things out there. For example, we created specialist guidelines for the National Autistic Society last year because WCAG isn't very good at looking at the needs of people with who are autistic. So again, there are sometimes places that other standards come along. And as I say, if you're interested in hearing more about that, we could do a webinar later in the year about it. But we've got more on all of the kind of standard stuff next month. I don't want to take the time today to do that. So we're going to go deep into all of that stuff, what it means, how it's changing, and what it means for you. And then section 9, so technology enablers. Nobody creates a website or a mobile app for, well, sometimes maybe a mobile app, but certainly never a website from scratch these days. You use enabling technologies to get there. Here are some of them that are the most obvious ones. So frameworks and libraries, JavaScript libraries, most websites at the moment are either using React or Angular JS. And then you've got content management systems, things like WordPress, Drupal, Sitecore, Adobe Experience Manager. These are the sorts of things that are there. Again, I didn't want to spend a huge amount of time today looking at what's happened in these, because most of the time, not a huge amount. The highlights from last year was that WordPress had a really bad year because W3C, who actually used WordPress in the past to create the website that has the WCAG guidelines on it, decided that WordPress had got so bad at accessibility midway through last year that they pulled the plug. That's the sort of thing that happens. And that's what good organizations do if their content management system doesn't allow them to do accessible stuff. So we know a huge amount about this area. I didn't really want to go deep into the kind of technology today, but if actually understanding more about the similarities and differences between these is something that will be really helpful for you, then please let us know. As I say, yeah, someone's saying the first public version of WCAG, it's actually what they term the editor's version. So it's not the final version by a long shot. There's a lot, but yeah, 3.0, there's actually a version from November and a version from a few weeks into January. So yeah, have a look. There's a lot of information, a lot of good stuff, a lot of not so good stuff, I'm afraid. More on that next month. Now we're moving on to just the final 2 sections, which are embedding accessibility into design patterns and components and design thinking. Designers have been thinking about accessibility in their design thinking for years. This is an article back from 2018 that I quoted 2 years ago in my 2019 things. Uber, IBM, Microsoft, they were all doing loads of great stuff about accessibility. And if you like, the big thing that they are all doing, and again, it's not really new. We were doing this when I was at the BBC kind of 15 years ago, but design systems, ways of putting things together and components to create stuff to prevent you having to reinvent the wheel all of the time. According to InVision, this is still the trend for 2021. The interesting thing is, InVision have this article out there saying why a design system is key to scaling accessibility. And partly it is, and maybe not as well. So these can be really, really useful for accessibility. We are creating, I think we're working on our third system for different clients at the moment. If you have one and you want inspiration, or you don't have one and you want to, if you like, be inspired or take someone else's, gov.uk have a really good one, the design system. And IBM Accessibility, their carbon design system is really good as well. So yeah, have a check there, because this stuff really can help if you get it right. Here's the note of caution. And someone got there before us. This was somebody saying they'd used one of these things. So we aren't accessible. I hear we can't say that, even though everyone adopted the system. How's this possible? Inclusivity is part of our identity. If you put stuff into your accessible design system and you think that's enough, it isn't. You need to make sure that it's used well, that things are put together. So each individual component, the bits of Lego, can be accessible, but if you don't know how to build a house from them, and if you build it upside down, then it's still not a usable or accessible house. And it's that sort of thing. What we find, having created lots of these, is that it is a little bit more complicated, and it's definitely not do this and accessibility is free, which some designers might have hoped. The final section, and then on to questions. I can see lots of things. See how the NHS design system coming through as well. There's some, loads of them out there. Most organizations have one. Some organizations share it in public, and it's wonderful, wonderful when they do. So the final section, which is all about, okay, if you've got it involved in all of those technologies, how do you bring it all together? How do you make sure that when you're creating something with all of this stuff, to try and work with all of this stuff, you're doing it in an efficient, sensible way? And that's where we come into embedding. And a few things that are kind of happening in this area. So testing methods. So it used to be that it was automated testing that could do about like 30% of WCAG, standard audits that does 100%, and user testing that actually kind of brings in, if you like, more usability elements to accessibility as too. But if you've been sort of following us last year, you'll have seen our live manual testing. This is effectively saying, if you don't have time to do the entire website, let's pick the 3 key user journeys. Those are likely to be the most important for your users. So if we can test those, that will be a good thing. And the way we do that is not by disappearing for 2 weeks, writing a report and sending it through, trying to explain all of the things that we found. We literally do that at the moment over Zoom, over the course of 2 half days, where we demonstrate, we actually go through those user journeys and say, if I were somebody using this screen reader, let's see what issues I find. It's a much quicker, it's a much more elegant process. It demonstrates all of the tools, so it's great for learning, and it also enables people to put stuff directly into their JIRAs, and they get a video of the thing rather than a big long document that no one wants to read. And we've made the snapshot audit version of that available now as well. The interesting thing is we've been doing these things because we thought that they were really important for the industry, and we found loads of clients who've absolutely loved them. And now 3.0 is coming along, and some of the things in 3.0 are very much based around this sort of idea of actually user journeys rather than dip tests of pages. So nice that people are kind of following. Automated testing tools. This is something that people can ask about all of the time, and there's always more and new ones. So here's some stuff. So on the right here, there are things that a lot of people in the accessibility industry think are a little bit of a dead end. These are kind of text, test and fix solutions like Audio Eye and Accessibility. They don't test your product, they actually fix it. Now, even if that were possible, that means you're totally dependent on them for the accessibility of your product, which we think is probably a really bad idea for every company out there, and also doesn't enable you to learn, improve, or scale. So we would suggest that even if these tools are brilliant at what they do, which is very questionable, we don't think that they are worth the money. If you like, behind the sales pitch are a number of things that even they themselves are now saying, yeah, the professional way of doing things is more like on the left. Now, this is a lot of stuff, so please don't try and take it all in, but effectively, automated tools, there are loads of them. There'll be another one in 5 minutes, I'm sure. The thing to know about them is they break down into two groups, really. The group on the right here, which is for content. So did you get your alt text right? That sort of thing. They look nice. They're for non-techies. You know, they're a really good thing. On the left here, you've got for stuff for techies. So I'm creating a mobile app or a website. It's very transactional. It's really complicated in terms of interaction. We're testing it with Selenium every night. Can we get accessibility into that? Yes, you can. These accessibility tools help. The only problem is, in general, they're up at 30% maximum, if you like, capacity. That's as much of WCAG they've been able to do. Other than this one's brand new. It's not really out there yet. So if you want to know what the latest is, VMware's Crest looks quite interesting. Number one, is open source, so it won't cost you anything. Number two, it integrates with kind of Wave and all the rest of it. Number three, they've used loads of AI to try and improve that 30%. And I've been looking at what they're doing. And for the first time, I think the AI is actually working. So if you're interested in automation, give that one a whirl. But what I would say is the key thing about all of this stuff really is to make sure that you get it into the way you work. So we want to go beyond web to all of those different types of new technologies coming along. We want to go beyond technical standards to knowing how to do this sort of thing. ISO 30071 is a great way of doing that. What it does is it enables you to go from the left here, where you're doing testing in a really efficient way, but you're also doing fixing in a way that's sustainable rather than sort of templates and sort of, you know, those sort of cheap stuff. And you're actually preventing problems in the first place. That's a really great thing to do. As I say, it's not just testing products, it's actually testing your organization to say, are we good at what we do? And a first step that you could do for that, if you haven't seen it yet, is our maturity scorecard. And as I say, we can send you information on that. That was the what is new in accessibility in 2021. So we just have time for a few questions. Pete, were there any particular ones that you think we should look at?
So there was a question earlier on about what about mobile games, video games and things like that. So how do we do beyond the world of just websites?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, so you remember I showed you a specialist guidelines for people who are autistic. There are specialist guidelines for video games as well. A really good friend of mine was actually responsible for that. There's the International Games Developers Association have got together with able gamers and with, as I say, a number of my old colleagues from the BBC to create game developer guidelines. If you just put game accessibility developer guidelines into Google, you'll probably find them. If you don't, please email me and I'll try and remember exactly what the URL is. Cool, good question. Next one, Pete.
There was one around toolkits for getting it right first time rather than fixing it at the end. And I think you mentioned it a little bit, but I wonder if it's a little bit more than just buy a toolkit.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a toolkit, I think is the thing, because it depends on, so I mean, if you're just thinking about a product team, you know, getting a product team to do things right, you know, a toolkit, if it includes, if you like, some sort of educational materials to help people understand what they need to do, if it incorporates sort of components so that people can put things together, even after all of that stuff, you actually need the managerial level to try and work out how some of these things work. For example, that blog that everybody is hitting at the moment on our website, the IE11 blog, that's all about, you know, if you have to keep on including and supporting that old browser, actually it's annoying. It takes loads of time. And so, you know, what are the, if you like, strategic managerial decisions to say, you know, what should we do in those circumstances? These are the sorts of things that are really important. And the IBM toolkit is not bad. They've got some, if you like, organizational stuff in there as well. But we've never found anything that comes anywhere close to proper training, you know, like where you get trained in something and part of that training is to actually do it and have that to and fro with the instructor to say, you know, have I got this right? What would I do in this situation? That sort of thing. It's difficult to do on a webinar, but all of our training is very much based around how do you apply this stuff rather than learn this stuff. Time for another question?
Well, unfortunately, we're hitting the 3 o'clock slot. We've got the questions in the chat, and after the call, we'll look at them and come back to you with the one who wins the book. So if you hadn't put your name with a full name that we can assess who you are, please can you write that in the chat? And we've got next month, we're going to be looking at accessibility standards. This is going to be on the 25th of February at a slightly later time of 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But do come along and hear about sort of what's happening with the standards and how to deal with them, because there's quite a lot out there. Is there anything else that you want to add, Jonathan?
No, I think it's anything. Just thank you very much for all the people who came onto the call. I hope it's been really interesting to you. I know there's a lot of information there. If I were you, I will be wanting the slides right now, but the blogs will be along soon, which will actually kind of fill in a little bit more information than I was able to cram into 1 hour. Anyway, I hope that's been a really good use of your 1 hour. Best of luck with all you're doing in accessibility this year. As I say, if there's anything that we can do to help in any of these areas that we've been talking about, then please get in contact with us. We're Hassell Inclusion. We'd love to help. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, everybody, and hope you can join us next month.